ready to start our reading lesson for today. We're going to read a story. I know we've been talking about last week. You did a tall tale. We've been talking a lot about tall tales, and you were to write a tall tale. So now we're going to kind of change the whole shebang, and we're going to start reading something that's not only could it be real, but it's also current day, like present day, almost present day. We're going to be reading a story today called Project Submarine. It has a lot to do with computers. And before we start, I just want to show you a few words that you're going to run across today as we read. And I want you to kind of be ready and prepared as to what they mean. This first sentence, it says, everyone in the room could hear the man's boisterous laugh. Boisterous means loud and even sometimes obnoxious. A security alarm sounded when the thief broke into the bank. You know what security means. It means keeping things safe. So a security alarm is an alarm that goes off when something's not safe. Ashley's top priority after school each day was to do her homework. Priority, that's something that you might put on the front burner, as some people say. Sometimes people will say, well, that goes on the back burner. That just basically means what's most important to get done right now. Your priority is something that's of utmost importance. In solving the mystery, Stephen used clues to find the information leak. Now, you know what a leak is. If you turn the water on and it's leaking underneath, that's one leak. But this kind of leak, and it's spelled the same way, this kind of leak is talking about an information leak. That means somebody has given some information somewhere that they weren't supposed to give. The information has been leaked. Here's one more word. He could not understand the unintelligible voices. Unintelligible. To kind of break this word apart, you see this right here, UN, that's a prefix. So let's just take that off for just a second. So then we're left with a root word, intelligent. Now, ible, I-B-L-E, is a suffix. So we'll take that off. So the root word here is intelligent, which means smart. But when you put this prefix and this suffix, it becomes unintelligible. That means you cannot figure it out. It's not able to be figured out. So an unintelligible voice means that you can hear someone talking, but you can't tell what they're saying. That's what that word means. All right, I want to show you a couple of pictures. I was born in 1973. And when I was in high school in the late 80s and the early 90s, we did use computers. We were taught how to use computers, but they looked a lot different than they do today. This was a computer system that I would have used when I was about 16 years old. I worked for a lawyer, and he had a computer system, but even the screen I had was much smaller than that. I think there's fixing to be a picture on here that shows you that. Now, right here is where you would put what we called the floppy disk. And a floppy disk looked like this. And it was pretty big. It was, maybe 6 inches across by maybe 7 inches long, or something like maybe 6 by 8 inches. Pretty big. And we called it a floppy disk because it was a disk that we'd put in the computer and we'd keep our information on it. Today they have those little things that you can plug in your computer and put information. It's not a disk, it's a flash drive. You can put information on a flash drive and just stick it in your pocket. Well, these floppy disks were also where we would keep information from the computer, but we called them floppy because they were a little bit like paper. They were thicker than paper, but they'd flop around. They were not hard. Now this one, we ended up later on getting these called a diskette, and these were smaller and they were hard, and they would fit into these little things here. This is kind of what my very first computer looked like when I worked for the lawyer. Even kind of like this a little bit. They're just very old. This is actually exactly the computer system that I had at school. when I was in high school. I bet to you it looks pretty ancient, doesn't it? Well, to me, it doesn't look very ancient. It looks old, but I remember using those. I'm going to go ahead and go back to the screen so that we can talk about this. All right, those are some old computer pieces and computer things. Now, today, when we use computers, of course, I'm using a computer to film this. We use a mouse. You know, here's my mouse. This is what I have to write with when I do it on the screen, and it's kind of hard. But today we use a mouse, and you don't have to be very smart. Well, let me rephrase that. You don't have to be very smart about computers to run a computer. You can run a computer even though you don't really understand the language. Kind of like flipping on a light switch. I don't have to be an electrician in order to turn the lamp on or to turn the light on. I know it's going to work. Same thing with a computer nowadays, but back in my day, you had to kind of know the computer language because you had to actually, we didn't have a mouse, we just had a keyboard, and we would have to learn the language of the computer, and we'd have to type the word print, P-R-I-N-T, and hit enter if we wanted it to print. Or if we wanted it to stop doing something, we'd have to press S-T-O-P. We'd have to put that word in there and press enter, and it would tell the computer to stop. Or whatever, if we wanted it to run a program, we'd have to actually write or type R-U-N, and then we'd have to write this code for whatever program we wanted it to. I mean, it was just this horrible thing. Well, today we just click on things, and computers are made that way. So the story that we're reading today, the setting is actually in the 1980s. So it's kind of in my day. You weren't even here yet. But anyway, so some of the things might sound a little bit odd to you, and it might sound, very historical, but it's really not, because I was alive and I'm really not that old. So the name of our story is called Project Submarine. And the boy's name that's in it, his name is Kyle. So if you'll look in your reader on page 66 at the top, it says Project Submarine. I'm going to read the little white section up at the top to kind of give us an idea of where we are. Kyle Ellis, an average kid with an above average machine, uses current technology to unravel a security problem. Although today Kyle's computer may look strange, outdated, and useless, in the 1980s it was the most recent in computer technology. This trend of computer improvement will even make tomorrow's computers outdate today's. So the computer that you have, if you have one, when you become a dad, maybe one day in the future, and then you have some kiddos, they're going to say, "Man, Dad, that computer that you had sure does look old." And you'll say, "Oh, but it's not." And so your children's computers will probably be way different than the ones that you use or that we use today. So, okay, so let's look at the page. Now, there's two things. Now, remember, I'm going to read to you, but you must follow along with me in the book, okay? And I read kind of fast, so make sure you keep up, okay? And as we read, I want you to be thinking about, I want you to discover, what is it that Kyle discovers? What kind of security problem did he discover? And then what happens because of his involvement in Project Submarine? So it's kind of a mystery, kind of a clue type game. So I want you to listen for the clues. Now, before we start, I'd like for you to get your work text out, because there is a work text page I want you to look at first right quick. We're not going to do it just yet. We'll do it at the end of the story. But if you'll look on page 27 in your work text, what you're going to be doing in a little bit is you're going to be plotting the story. Remember, way back when I very first started teaching you with these lessons, we were talking about plot and how, this happened first and this happened this second and this happened next and this happened last. And remember, we were using a little candy wrapper to show the plot. This is the beginning, this is the middle part, and this is the end part. So as we read, when we're done, you're going to go back and you're going to put these events in order, these events at the top, okay? You're going to put them in order from 1 to 5, what happened first, second, third, fourth, and fifth. Then what you're going to do is on the bottom where it says to diagram the plot, you're going to write those sentences in the sections where they belong, okay? Now, I think you don't have to, you can just write the number of the sentence. You don't have to write the sentence itself. But we'll talk about that in a minute. I just wanted you to kind of, in your mind, be thinking about the plot of the story as we read. And be thinking about what is it that Kyle finds out and what happens because of his involvement with this thing called Project Submarine. All right, let's begin reading. Now, you follow along with me. We're on page 66. Kyle Ellis punched the enter button. A bright blue error sign flashed at him as the computer started to beep. Oh no! Kyle slumped back in his chair. Keep trying, Mr. Janovich said. Ever since your dad set up this homework checking system, you've always got your homework done in microseconds. His boisterous laugh filled the office. Kyle typed, "End program," and pulled out the disk. Look at this, Kyle, Mr. Janovich said. Mr. Janovich was Mr. Ellis's partner and an earnest computer fan. He enjoyed Kyle's afternoon visits to the office. Mr. Janovich started another program, and a chessboard appeared. The computer has had me in check all afternoon, but I think I may have a way around it. He punched 2 keys, and his queen zipped across the screen and landed beside the computer's bishop. The computer hummed for a moment, then moved a knight forward. Checkmate! Flashed the screen. Ugh! Mr. Janovich typed into the screen. Well, I'll see you tomorrow, he said, closing the program. Good night, Kyle said. He carefully shut down the computer. The door closed behind Mr. Janovich, and Kyle sighed. Computers could do more things than he ever imagined. They seemed able to do anything, or at least almost anything. But just yesterday, Dad had said they couldn't think up an answer to the security problem at work. With the program Kyle had, he could check his math, but the computer wouldn't just give the answer straight out. Just then, the door from the laboratory opened and a man in a white lab jacket stepped out. He set his toolbox on the office floor and held the door for the repairman. The edge of his slacks caught on the lid of the toolbox and popped it open. A disk lay on the upper shelf. Kyle could see that the other shelves were empty. He looked again. The words Project Submarine had been penciled on the label of the disk. Then he noticed the lower label, High Priority, Do Not Remove from Security Area. Kyle's head spun. Dad had just mentioned the security problem at the labs. This was the leak. These men were stealing the secret information. Quickly and silently, Kyle snatched up the disk. He slid it under his chair cushion. His hands felt cold and clammy, but a drip of sweat fell off his forehead as he pretended to adjust the computer. Hey, the man in the lab jacket said, reaching for the toolbox. What happened to the... Kid, did you take the disk from this box? He leaned over Kyle, frowning and clenching his fist. Kyle grabbed the homework disk off the desk. Do you mean this? He asked. He tried to keep his voice steady, but he could hear it rise in his throat. Yeah, the man said. He snatched it and stuffed it into his jacket. The repairman narrowed his eyes. I don't like the looks of this, Jake, he said. A loud bell began clanging. The alarm! Jake ran for the door. The bolt shot closed. Let's get out of here, the other man said. He pulled on the handle. The door didn't budge. Come on, he said. He flung the toolbox against the window, shattering the glass. He kicked the broken pieces out of the way. Here's our ticket out, Jake! He grabbed Kyle by the arm. Kyle felt himself lifted out the window. Then Jake tossed him into a van. He fell backward among a jumble of machines. The other man jumped into the driver's seat next to Jake. The wheels screeched as the van jerked to life and sped into traffic. As the van swayed from side to side, Kyle grabbed the seat in front of him and hung on with all his might. They sped down the highway, passing cars and trucks in a swerving roller coaster ride. A siren sounded. The driver darted in front of a car and turned into a side street, swinging the back of the van in a wide open arc. The ride was a series of stops and starts, jerks and jumbles, until they reached an old warehouse. We'll hide here, said the man who had driven the van. I'll call Wendell. We'll have to take what we have and go. Jake dragged Kyle into the warehouse and tied him to a pole. Then he set up a computer. The more you find out, the bigger problem you're going to be, kid, Jake said. 'Cause what are we going to do if you find out too much? Kyle dropped his eyes to the floor. Jake laughed and hit his knee. The computer beeped. Kyle peered at it without raising his head. A game flashed onto the screen. "You're really going to find out too much this way." Jake piloted his spaceship through asteroids, flying saucers, and enemy rockets, laughing to himself as he shot them down. All right, before we finish our story, we're going to kind of stop right there and want to ask you a few questions just to make sure you understand where we are. So what is the information leak that Kyle is able to find out for his dad? We don't know the exact stuff, but we know that the men are doing what? They're stealing some kind of information because they had that disc. And it wasn't supposed to be out of the security area, was it? How did Kyle trick those thieves? He replaced the disc with his homework disc, didn't he? Yeah. But once the security system went off and they heard it and they started breaking windows so that they could get out because the door's locked, and so they had to go out the window. Why did they grab Kyle and kidnap him? Maybe they could hold him hostage or get a ransom for him even. Why did they take him to the warehouse? You think that was their hideout, maybe? Maybe that was their hideout. Who knows? All right. Let's look at page 68, where I was reading on that page. Now, starting right where it says, "Let's get out of here." You see that? Where it says, "Let's get out of here"? All right. No, I'm sorry. One paragraph down where it says, "Kyle felt himself lifted out of the window." Okay, I want you to read that part just from there where it says Kyle felt himself. Read that part all the way up to where it says, "In front of him hung on with all his might." Okay, on that same page, you see that little paragraph there? It's right above the picture on page 68. Okay, and from where it says Kyle felt himself. I want you to read it like you're a sportscaster. Like you're giving a play-by-play, like on like a football person giving, "Oh, so-and-so's got the ball, and so-and-so did this, and so on." Do it like a sportscaster. Can you do that for me? Now, I can't hear you, but I think your grandmother can hear you, okay? So do it like you're a sportscaster and start where it says Kyle felt himself and read up to the top part of that next section. Did you do it? Did you read it like a sportscaster? Like play by play. He did this and they did this and back and forth and back and forth. All right. So look at page 69. This is the one where it shows the van going down the back road right before they got into the thing. Who do you think Wendell is? Remember in there they said they'd call Wendell? Who do you think he is? You think he's the boss man maybe? Why will the men have to take what they have and leave? They have to take what they have and leave. Why? Police are involved, so now they're going to be on the run because the police are going to be looking for them now because there was a security breach. What does Jake do with Kyle? Tied him to a pole. Can you read on page 69 out loud? In a gruff, mean kind of voice. Read what Jake says about Kyle's being a problem, where he said, you see the picture on 69? Look right above it to the left where it says, "The more you find out." See that? I want you to read that like you're the bad guy. Read that like you're the bad guy. Read it out loud. I bet you did that really well. All right, turn the page. Now I'm going to read the rest of the story. As I read, I want you to listen to what happens to Kyle. Are you ready? Follow along. A car horn honked. Jake ran to the door. A mumble of unintelligible voices reached Kyle's ears. He pulled at the rope on his hands and felt it loosen. Several men walked toward him, and Kyle held still. "Well, Harvey, did he say anything else?" Jake asked. "We'll just have to lay low for a day or two," said Harvey, the man who had driven the van. "Let's check the program we got." He pulled out Kyle's homework program and stuck it into the machine. "Run," he typed. The disk drive hummed, and then the screen lit up with a program. And if you look there at the top of page 70, that's what it said. Now that's what computers used to say. Instead of coming up with all these app things that you can click on, or programs that you can click on, this is what it would say. And he says, "What?" Jake shrieked. He ripped the disk out of the computer. Just look at this homework program." "I bet that kid." His eyes turned to Kyle. Look at the top of 71. Kyle's heart raced. "What should I do?" he thought. "I gotta think." Jake shoved the disk at Kyle's face and broke it into a worthless mess. "We're gonna get that program," he fumed. "Like you said, Harvey, here's our ticket." He tapped Kyle's chest. "Let's go call the boss and arrange the details," Harvey said. Kyle heard them lock the door as they walked out. He pulled at the ropes. They seemed to loosen more, but his hand wouldn't fit between them and the pole. As Kyle twisted and turned, the rope caught on a nail. He tugged, and the rope popped loose. Kyle fell forward onto his knees. Wasting no time, he scrambled to his feet and raced to the door. The men had locked it from the outside. Kyle searched the windows. The lowest one was at least 20 feet from the ground. He paced the floor. If only computers could figure out a problem like this, he thought to himself. He stopped in front of a computer. The file of disk lay in a jumble. Kyle stuck one into the slot and typed "Run." The computer began to list names and addresses. Kyle saw his dad's company name flash by. He murmured. Kyle stuck in another disk. Quickly, he glanced through the files and chose the ones that looked most important. He checked a few more disks, planning to find a safe place to hide them. Then he ran the program titled Warehouse. A set of floor plans covered the screen. Kyle reached for the return key, then 2 words caught his attention. Emergency exit. Kyle bit his lip. If the emergency exit wasn't blocked, it would be immediately behind him. He pulled out the disk. The front door rattled. Kyle scooped up the disk and raced for the emergency exit. A big stack of empty boxes blocked his way. Kyle shoved them aside. The emergency exit sign, covered with an inch of dust, lay shattered where it had fallen on the floor. Kyle attacked the door, praying that it would open. The hinges creaked and gave way. Turn the page. "Hey, the kid's gone!" Kyle tore blindly down the alley and then turned down another, expecting someone to grab him at any moment. His lungs felt as if they were bursting. The street lights were just coming on. The shadows they made seemed to be filled with kidnappers. The streets were deserted. Kyle saw a gas station on the corner ahead. The fellow pumping gas into a car brushed his long hair out of his eyes and yawned. Kyle watched from the shadows, unable to decide whether or not to trust such a character. Just then a police car pulled into the station. Kyle broke into a run. "Help!" he called. The police officer jumped out of the car. "What's the problem, son?" he asked. Kyle stumbled as he reached him. "I'm Kyle Ellis. I was kidnapped." He held his sides and gasped for air. "I just escaped. Please help me." The police officer let out a low whistle. "The radio's been screaming about you and some stolen information all afternoon. Hop in. Let's get you down to the station." Dad was waiting in the chief's office when they got to the station. "Kyle, are you all right? They called me as soon as the officer radioed in that he had picked you up. Did they hurt you?" "They tied me to a pole in some old warehouse and tried to scare me. They sure were mad when they found out the disc they had was the homework program that you wrote for me." "How'd they get their hands on that?" Dad looked puzzled. Kyle grinned. "I switched the disc as soon as I realized that what they had was top security. I hid the real disc under a cushion in your office." He held up the discs. "And here's all the rest of the stolen discs. I brought them with me." Dad put his arm around Kyle's shoulders. "That's quite a save you made there, son. But how'd you find your way out of that warehouse? Surely those men didn't leave you a map." "I don't suppose they meant to," Kyle laughed, "but when you've got a computer and the right disc, you can find out just about anything." All right, that was a good story, good ending. It was It had a lot of excitement in it, didn't it? All right, so let's go back here and see if we can answer us some questions. Go back to page 70, the part that's got all that computer stuff written at the top of it. Do you see that? How does the author show how upset Jake is? Remember Jake's face when he put that disc in and it ended up being the homework disc? How did the author let you know how upset he was? Remember what he did to that disc? He shoved it into Kyle's face and he broke it all to pieces, tore it all up. What does Kyle do to get loose from the ropes? He keeps trying to pull and then it hanged on a nail and he was able to get out that way. What do you think happened to the thieves? Do you think they got caught? It doesn't really tell us. I bet they did get caught because Kyle had a lot of good information on him, didn't he? All right, so let's look over on page 71. And let's find the spot where Kyle discovers a way out of the warehouse. That's going to be, okay, on the right side, up where it says, then he ran the program. Do you see that paragraph? Then he ran the program titled Warehouse. Okay? From that paragraph all the way down page 71, I'd like for you to pause this and read that out loud. Did you read it? How did Kyle keep a clear head? I don't know that I would have kept a clear head in all that, but how did he show to be courageous? He was thinking. He kept his thoughts clear and he had priorities about his dad's business and to get himself out of there, and he was able to see straight and to think straight. He didn't, they captured me. That's what I'd be. I'd be crying like, maybe they captured me. They do. But Kyle did not. He showed great courage. Look at the last page, page 72. How does the author let us know it's not time? The street lights said that they were casting a glow or a shadow, and everywhere he looked, it's like he could see kidnappers. Remember the guy at the gas station with the long shaggy hair, and he kind of put it out of his face and he yawned when he was pumping his gas? Would you have trusted a guy like that, you think? If I was running away from some bad guys, I'd probably trust anybody except the bad guys. I don't know if that would be right or not, but that's what I would do. All right, why do you think the author chooses not to tell you what happens to the kidnappers? Well, there could be maybe a part 2 to the story. There's not right here, but maybe later, or maybe there's a book you can get. Maybe this is just an excerpt, or maybe he just wanted you to guess what you think happened to the kidnappers. Who knows? All right, get your work text out. And let's go ahead and look at page 27 where we had this plot. Remember this plot that we were doing? Now, what I'm going to have you do, not right yet, but just in a few minutes, I'm going to have you number the things that happened in order, 1 through 5 at the very top. And then you're going to take those numbers and you're going to put, where it says beginning, you're going to put, well, I guess you'll have to write the sentence on those. You can't just put the number. You'll have to put whatever the beginning is, whatever happened in the beginning, whichever one you think is number 1, you'll have to write that sentence underneath the beginning, okay? And then do the same thing for end. And in the middle, where it says middle, you can write just the numbers. It's going to be about 3 of the numbers. So number 1, the sentence at the top that you think happened first, you're going to put a number 1 beside it, and you're going to write that sentence underneath where it says beginning. The one that you choose to be number 5, the last sentence that you choose that happened, you're going to write that sentence underneath where it says end. The other ones that are left, you can just write their numbers in the middle, whatever's left. So it's going to be 2, 3, and 4. But we have to make sure you get those right, okay? Pretty easy. Just follow the instructions if I messed that up for you. Now, before you do that, let's look on page 28 in your work text right quick. Now, whenever you listen to the weather, do you ever listen to the weather? we have one of those Google things in our kitchen, and oftentimes the kids will go in there, or I'll go in there and I'll say, hey Google, what's the weather like today? And she'll say whatever the weather forecast is supposed to be. But what does the forecaster tell you, or what does Google tell you when you ask about it? What they think the weather's going to be. It'll tell you the high temperature, the low temperature, if it's going to rain, if it's going to be cloudy, if it's going to be sunny, or if there's any alerts out. It's going to tell you those things. Now, the forecaster, the weatherman, let's just think of the weatherman. Now, he's predicting what the weather may do. Does he know for certain what the weather's going to do? No. Who is the only one who knows everything for the future? God is the only one that knows for sure. He's the one that controls the weather and tells the weather what to do. What does the weatherman use to help make these predictions? Satellites, maps, radars, computers, things like that. Those are the things that he uses to predict the weather. He's not always right, but that's what he uses to give his best guess as to what's going to happen. Now, here's a question. Does the forecaster ever change his mind? Yeah, he does. Now, think about the story Project Submarine. What helped you predict what was going to happen? Pictures, the title of the story, some of the clues in the story kind of told you kind of what was going to happen, right? Just a little bit. But as you started reading the story, did your predictions change any? Did you change your predictions, or did it end up exactly like you thought it was going to end up? It didn't for me. I've read the story before. It's been a long time ago when I read the story. But so sometimes your predictions may change depending on, if you get clues, doesn't mean your clues are always going to lead you to the right prediction. So in this case, the author didn't really want you to have a prediction. Look at page 28 in your work text. There's a picture right there, and right above it, there's a round blue circle. It says, writers give clues to the reader that will help him to guess or predict what's going to happen next. But oftentimes he puts in a surprise, and it doesn't always end up that way. Now, what we're going to do here, and you're going to do this page yourself, is you're going to read these little tiny paragraphs to yourself, okay? And then you're going to you're going to find the bubble that best completes the outcome, what you think is going to happen, okay? Just fill in, there's one answer on each. And where it says write an ending, to choose a story and write an ending to it, you don't have to do that. Just do the two things on page 28. And then I'd like for you to finish the plot page on page 27. And I'm going to grade that page. Now, if you have any trouble, you can message me and I'll be happy to help you, okay? All right, that's all for today.